Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking an objective, deep dive look into the mechanics of one of the most scrutinized business entities in the entire world, the Trump Organization. We're going to peel back the layers to understand how this conglomerate actually functions, how it evolved over nearly a century, and how its totally unique structure has navigated both immense global expansion and, recently, unprecedented legal challenges.
To really get a handle on the sheer scale of what we're talking about, just consider this number. Over 250. That is the estimated number of affiliates and subsidiaries out there that actively use the Trump name. We're not just talking about a single company sitting in one office building. This is a massive, sprawling conglomerate that touches virtually every corner of the consumer and real estate market. So you have to ask yourself, what exactly is the Trump Organization today? I mean, how did a local family business, basically just building houses in the outer boroughs of New York, transform into this incredibly complex global web? And what really lies beneath the surface of the brand itself? Well, here is our roadmap for The Explainer. We're going to start with the roots of the empire, look at the pivot to branding, explore the global conglomerate, examine the politics and conflicts, and finally break down the legal reckoning. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Roots of the Empire, Building the Foundation. You know, the organization didn't start out with golden escalators or flashy Manhattan skyscrapers. It was actually formally incorporated way back in 1927 as E. Trump and Son. The E stood for Elizabeth Christ Trump, a widow who carried on her late husband's real estate business, and the son was Fred Trump. Together, they built up a solid foundation by constructing and financing single-family homes and later supermarkets in Queens and Brooklyn. It was a very traditional brick-and-mortar local business. And there is a really stark contrast between the two foundational eras of this company. On one hand, you have the Fred Trump era, which was totally defined by middle-class housing and massive apartment complexes like Shore Haven and Trump Village. But when Donald Trump officially began leading the company in 1971 and eventually rebranded it as the Trump Organization, we see a massive strategic pivot. The focus shifted abruptly to luxury Manhattan skyscrapers like Trump Tower, grand hotels like the Grand Hyatt, and the high-stakes world of Atlantic City casinos. That brings us to Section 2, the pivot to branding, a shotgun approach. This is where the company moved way beyond just pouring concrete. Get a load of this list. We're talking Trump steaks, Trump vodka, golden sneakers, God bless the USA Bibles, digital NFT trading cards. They even had a branded board game. The organization began applying what you could call a shotgun approach to branding, just attaching the name to an incredibly wild and sometimes puzzling variety of side ventures. The goal here wasn't necessarily that every single product would absolutely dominate its market. Instead, it was about sheer volume, omnipresence, and transforming the family name from a real estate developer into a universally recognized, monetized brand. So the absolutely crucial point is how this brand power translated back into real estate. Enter real estate licensing. This is a brilliant business model where developers essentially pay millions just to put a famous name on a building and use that brand's public face for marketing. The Trump Organization does not actually own many of the glittering buildings that display its name around the world. For them, it's a huge win. They generate massive fees with minimal financial risk, while the outside developers take on all the heavy debt of actual construction. Now for Section 3, the global conglomerate, expanding the empire. Let's see how this licensing model took them international. Let's break down the actual numbers. Based on 2019 estimates by Forbes, we can see exactly where the wealth of the organization was concentrated. About 50% of the net worth was still anchored firmly in hard assets, specifically New York City real estate. But a massive 33% came from national and international properties, heavily driven by their golf resorts. And that remaining 17%, that came from those highly lucrative, low-risk licensing deals and other ventures we just talked about. And the footprint we're talking about is literally global. The brand infiltrated international real estate markets through some very high-profile partnerships. They operate historic golf resorts in Scotland and Ireland and manage courses in Dubai. There are licensed residential towers spanning India in Mumbai, Pune, and Kolkata, along with major condominium developments in places like the Philippines and Turkey. It's a win-win. The local developers get the prestige of a globally recognized luxury brand, and the Trump Organization gets a steady stream of international revenue. Moving into Section 4, Politics and Conflicts, the Oval Office intersection. What happens when the head of a private conglomerate becomes the president?
Well, in 2017, right before the inauguration, a transition had to take place. Management of the various businesses was handed over to sons Donald Jr. and Eric, alongside some longtime executives, and the companies were placed into a revocable trust. However, and this is a vital structural detail to remember, while the day-to-day leadership changed, the fundamental ownership did not. Donald Trump completely retained his financial stake in the business throughout his presidency, allowing him to legally receive updates on the company's profitability. Because that ownership structure remained totally intact, it directly led to an unprecedented intersection of business and state. In January 2024, a report released by the Democratic members of the House Oversight Committee detailed over $7.8 million in payments made by foreign governments to Trump-owned businesses during his presidency. Revenue from foreign diplomats staying at Trump properties or utilizing Trump services flowed right back into the organization, sparking intense, ongoing scrutiny regarding conflicts of interest.
Which brings us to Chapter 5, the legal reckoning, financial and judicial scrutiny. We're going to focus strictly on the mechanics of the investigations here.
The exact mechanism that prosecutors zeroed in on was valuation. Just look at the data for the 40 Wall Street property back in 2012. The organization presented the property's value as $527 million to potential lenders in order to secure favorable loans. But to tax officials, that very same property was valued at just $16.7 million to minimize tax burdens. It's this specific massive discrepancy, literally altering the value depending on the audience, that became the absolute foundation for severe legal action. And these legal hits accumulated rapidly. In July 2021, criminal tax fraud charges were filed against the organization and its longtime chief financial officer. By December 2022, a New York jury convicted the Trump Organization on all 17 criminal tax fraud charges. Then came the civil side. In September 2023, a judge ruled the organization repeatedly committed fraud regarding those exact property valuations we just looked at. And finally, in February 2024, massive financial penalties were ordered. During this whole process, we kept hearing this really dramatic legal term thrown around, the corporate death penalty. This referred to the September 2023 ruling that actually ordered the cancellation of the organization's New York business certificates, attempting to send their business entities into receivership for dissolution. Make no mistake, this was an absolute existential threat to the conglomerate's ability to operate in its home state. It fundamentally challenged the empire's survival. The financial penalties also escalated incredibly fast. First, a judge ordered a staggering penalty of nearly $355 million, which, when you add the interest, ballooned to over $450 million. The immediate threat here was that state officials could literally begin seizing properties if it wasn't paid. Then, the New York Appeals Court intervened, lowering the immediate requirement to $175 million, with a super strict 10-day deadline. Ultimately, the organization successfully posted the bond right at the buzzer, effectively shielding their iconic assets from immediate seizure while the lengthy appeals process plays out.
And really, that brings us to where we are today. The Trump Organization currently operates with independent, court-appointed monitors tracking their finances, all while navigating hundreds of millions in penalties and ongoing appeals. It kind of forces us to ask, after surviving the Great Depression, multiple real estate crashes, bankruptcies, and now unprecedented legal judgments, what is the ultimate future of a global conglomerate whose entire value is built upon a single, deeply polarizing name? It's a question of resilience and branding that business historians are going to be studying for decades.